everyone. I am about to speak with author Betsy Carter, and I am so excited. I tried to get a hold of Betsy. This book came out last November. No, September, and it's called We Were Strangers Once. And I saw it last year, and we just kept postponing. Finally, our schedules have been able to connect, and I get to talk with her. So, everyone, here is Betsy. Hi, everyone. I am so excited because I am speaking with author Betsy Carter, and we're going to be talking about her newest book that she has right there. She's going to hold it up for us. We Were Strangers Once. I am so excited to talk to you about this book. This book came out back in September. I mean, it's been on my list, Betsy, okay? Since September, and it's May. So I am just so excited that we finally get to talk about it because everybody was talking about this book. They're like, read this book. I have all these book reviewers on Instagram, and they tell me what to read, and they were like, you have to read this book. You have to read this
Well,
book.
it just came out in paperback, so you can read it in paperback
When
now.
did it come out in paperback? What's the date?
Like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Awesome. Because I would definitely put the link for that underneath here so everybody can go get that. So
Good.
this book has done so well. You must be so excited because even now people are still talking about this book. So
Well, that's great.
yeah. So okay. It's World War II historical fiction, like my favorite topic to talk about. I've read so much historical fiction based in World War II, but I always find another story. And here we go, another story that's different. The things that I learned from you, I think that's why people continue to write historical fiction from that time period. Don't you think so?
Well, yeah. I mean, everyone who lived through that period of time has a story, and they're all different.
Right. And what I liked is that this started before, so you kind of got a sense of what Germany was like before World War II, which I never really read a lot about. So I learned a lot of things about that time, and your character development is crazy. I mean, I felt like not only that, but I mean, just the scenery. Everybody talked about how you described it was like you were there in Germany at that time, and it just seems so beautiful. And okay, so let's talk about this main character, and I don't even know how to say his name. Is it Egon?
Egon.
Okay, in my head, that's what I was hearing, but I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure. So I loved his story about his parents. So this is put into like three different. I don't want to say chapters, three different parts of this novel, and his is the first part, and his story about his parents. And so you tell us about it as much, so I don't give any spoilers away.
His parents, his father was his parents were the Audubons of Europe. His father wrote about birds and about plants and about wildflowers, and his mother did all the illustrations. And his parents were a real love story. I mean, they just met and they fell in love instantly. He was much older than she was. He kind of came along later in their lives, and the parents took him. The mother would always take him into the Stadtwald, which is a forest in Frankfurt, and she would sit with them and they would watch the birds, and she would draw the birds and he would draw the birds, and he learned a lot about nature and animals. And his father, who was a little bit more remote, would take him into the woods, and they would find animals in distress and they would help heal the animals. So he comes out of his childhood. I don't want to tell you too much. He comes out of this childhood uh, never feeling completely absorbed by his father, though he loved his mother deeply. But he does come out of this childhood with a love of animals and a real knowledge of animals and a caring of animals. Then he's not as good he can't draw the way his mother can draw, and he finds that what he's interested is in human beings and how human beings work, and he becomes an ophthalmologist. He becomes fascinated with the eye, and he becomes a very well-known ophthalmologist in Frankfurt, and he's very handsome, and he becomes a real dandy. He has millions of girlfriends, and he has quite a life and quite a successful practice in Frankfurt. And the story picks up when you can see what's happening in Frankfurt. You can see the anti-Semitism moving in. And his best friend, his name is Meyer, who is a journalist, has gotten out. It's now about 1935, and he's gotten out, or a little later, I'm sorry. And he's gotten out, and he keeps saying to Egon, you're an ophthalmologist. read the writing on the wall. You've got to get out of there. And very, very hesitantly and only under dire circumstances does Egon finally make the break and leave his life and come to America. And that's when part two really begins.
And then there's her story, which
Her
I
story.
love her story because, well, it's heartbreaking. And her Katrina, I wanted to say it right because I've been driving and my head is like, but Katrina, which I love that name. I was like, oh, I love her name. But so she's also from immigrants, but it's a totally different. They're Irish
Irish
American, which
yes.
I loved how you did that. I loved,
Well, the reason I did that is that I didn't want to make this just a story about German immigrants. I wanted it to be immigrants sort of inclusive, and theirs are very different stories. She comes from a very, very poor family. Um, they come to America. Her father is out of work, and he becomes a sort of a bad guy. He's drinking a lot and getting into fights, and she loves her father. She's crazy about her father, but he leaves the family when she's quite young to go to Chicago and get a better job. And they never really hear from him again. So she and her mother and her brother are kind of on their own. And the mother has a horrible job doing laundry at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. And Katrina really is one of these women who just pulls herself up by her bootstraps. She also has a love of animals. She works for the ASPCA, and she at a very young age meets a boy, falls in love with him, and it's a real love story, and he dies when he's very, very young. And then she goes on, she meets a wealthy guy who runs a very fancy restaurant in New York City, and all these famous people come in and out of the restaurant, and she becomes like his showpiece and the maitre d', and things go along pretty well for a while, and they live in a big townhouse in Washington Heights and everything, and starts to become iffy when he stops coming home at night, and then he's missing, and well, I don't know if I want to say what happened to him, but he doesn't come to a good end, and Katrina is left on her own. So it's really parallel stories of different kinds of immigrant experiences.
Yeah, and I love how you merged their two stories together because I don't know because that's what was happening at that time anyway. Is that people were finding the fact that he got out. Like I kept thinking, oh no, he's not going to get out of Germany. But then he does get out, and then gets to come to America, and it's okay. So I'm going to tell everybody how this book starts, so that I don't give spoilers away. Because the more I talk about it, the more spoilers. The more spoilers I give away, and I want everybody to read this the way I did. So I love that you start with an Obama quote, okay? Because let's just face it, I miss Obama. So it made me tear up a little bit because he was such a good speaker and he had such great lines. And he says, "My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too." And I was like, "Oh, you named it after I remembered that, but then I didn't remember that that's where you got the title. That the title came together, and I love that. So it kind of made me tear up because we are where we are, and I was like, that's right. He gave. I mean, if anybody just remembers the speeches that Obama gave and how awesome it was, like I miss that. I miss that. So moving on, but then I pick out one of my favorite quotes in this book, and it's a little bit later on in this book, but I thought that it really captured the essence of it to me. And because if I stop and I was on my Kindle and I took a picture of this quote. That's how much I liked it. It says, "If he wanted a life, he'd have to give up the very things that defined it." And I was like, I don't know, I'm older now, and to think about that, think about like where he was and what he had to go through, and it was like if he wanted to save his life, he was going to have to give up some things in order to save his life.
Really.
In order to save his life, and
Yeah.
it just touched me, and and I love good quotes. So, so what did you when you came up with that Obama quote to make that? Like, how did that happen?
I think that because I am the child of immigrants, I think that speech and that sentiment of all of us being strangers once has always stayed with me. Um, my parents came over here, and my parents were German Jewish refugees, and they came over in the 30s. And this is not their story, but I they're gone now, and I only recently started to appreciate what it's like to be an immigrant in this country and what it's like to come over, leave everything behind, and try to start again. And uh, the only way I could really get in touch with my parents' experience was to write about it. And so I started this book. It took me about 6 years to write. I did a lot of research. I went to Germany actually to see what that was like. And I just really, I didn't realize how much degradation and how much people didn't want them to be here and how hard it was to just try to start all over again. And a character like Egon came from a lot of money, came from prosperity, comes to America, and the job he gets is he works behind a deli counter in a grocery store, and they call him the cheese man, and he has to wear a tag that says Egon Schneider, the cheese man, and it was so humiliating to him, and I just wanted to show how hard that fall must have been for them. And there were surprises along the way, and there were kind people along the way, but there were also people along the way who said, go back where you came from, and called them all kinds of names, and I showed that in the book as well.
Yeah. I'm half English and half German. But my German ancestors had come to Pennsylvania a long time ago. Like, I can't even trace it back. It's so long ago. But my English part of my family, they came in the early 1900s, and I don't know why. Because they came to nothing. They had nothing in Pennsylvania. And I always wanted to know, like, did you have nothing there? Like, I think as we get older, we kind of look back and go, why did they make the decisions that they made? Or how did I get where I am because of decisions they made, And I don't know. I think we learn to appreciate that a little bit more and to be able to pass those stories on to our children,
Sure.
So
Sure.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I read it in the back of the book, but I love that. I wanted you to tell it. So I love
And,
that.
no, and in fact, I mean, I'm not proud of this, but I was embarrassed about their accents and their strangeness, and they ate strange foods, which I put in the book. And I tried very hard to be all American girl. I mean, I was a baton twirler, and I went out for cheerleading, and I went to Baptist Bible school, and it was really. And my father was always very kind of on my case to, always telling me, you really don't know what we went through, and I'm just so sorry that they're not here to know that I finally kind of came to terms with that.
Yeah, and my family spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, and that was very looked down upon as not educated. And then so my parents didn't teach it to us, but now I look at it like a little bit more, as I get older, I'm like, oh, but it was part of my heritage, even if it was looked down upon. I mean, it was there, right? So anyway, okay, so I want to talk about your book that I want to read it because everybody was talking about it, and I guess it's like an autobiography of yours, or a memoir, I should say. That you wrote? Are you
you mean my memoir? I wrote a memoir, yes.
Yes, Nothing to Fall Back On. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was reading, and people who had read it were like, you have to read this book of hers. And I wish I would have seen that sooner because I would have read it before we talked. But I really want to know, like, why is everybody talking about this book?
Well, I don't know, but I'm guessing that I wrote the book because I had quite a successful career as a magazine editor and quite a glamorous life as a magazine reporter and editor. And while I was having this glamorous life in New York City, my personal life was really going to hell and falling apart. And I think I wrote that book to talk about the sort of duality of, what looks shiny and pretty on the surface is really a mess going forward. And so it's about things that happened. I had a spate of, about 8 years where things just one thing after another. My house burned down. I was in a terrible car accident. My marriage broke up. I got breast cancer, and it goes on and on. So, and in the whole time, I was running magazines and stuff. And so it's a gritty story, which I tried to make. I didn't want people to read the book and just say, I can't bear this. And so it's funny, I think, too, as well. But it's all true, unfortunately.
Well, I think that we need to read stories like that. First of all, to have been like, magazines are right now, I don't even know what they look like because there's so much online stuff. So when you were a magazine editor, I mean, I grew up that magazines were a huge part of my life. So, to be a magazine editor, like I looked at that as a job that, like truly was the ultimate job, and I saw you wrote for a lot of really famous magazines, and I mean, you were editor for really famous magazines, and, that was the job, like for us that read them and bought them and looked forward to them every week and every month. And I would love to have the money back that I spent on magazines.
Me too. Yes, unfortunately, I mean, I was very lucky to be in that business when I was in that business, and now it's all changed, and magazines are sort of fading away, and
Yeah.
things online are so much cheaper to produce and
Yeah.
receive, and you don't have to print them, and you don't have to ship them, and like that. So, yes, I don't know what will be the future of magazines.
Yeah, I don't either, but I do have a soft spot, even when I'm in line at the grocery store and there still are a couple left,
I do that too.
I still look at them and I'm like, oh, remember when I used to buy? But now it's like old news, unfortunately. Like you look at any of those people or whatever, and it's old news because you already know the stuff that's been printed there.
Right.
But,
I mean, some of the magazines still have, they hold on because of fashion magazines, for example.
Right.
That doesn't get old right away.
Exactly. But I feel like back when I was reading them, those models and everything that were in like we knew them by name. We knew who they were. We knew it was a big thing, and you got to know them probably. So you guys.
Well, no, I didn't really get to know them, but I got to work with them a little bit.
You guys work with them. Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to be reading that because, like I said, we need stories like that because everybody goes through that. It's all of us. It's every woman's story, really. Like things look so good on the outside and what's happening. Because we try to go out in the world and portray something that not necessarily is what's going on.
Yeah, so. I know. And it's because you look at Facebook and there are some Facebook lives that seem perfect, and you think, what's really going on there? And you see these pictures of happy families and they do wonderful things, and I always wonder, what is the story behind that?
Yeah, I remember when I was going through my divorce a couple of years ago, and I have 6 children, and it was horrible and whatever. But anyway, I saw somebody out, somewhere at a restaurant, and she. It was a friend of mine, and I was telling her, and she's like, "Yeah, I just got divorced." I'm like, "But your Facebook picture has." She's like, "Yeah, that's
so happy."
So that's right. So and not only now we have like the social media part of it, and and so it makes us look like a false identity in a weird way. You try to be true.
We create our own identity on Facebook or on social media, and that's kind of interesting in a way, but it's not a good way to get to know somebody necessarily.
No, absolutely not. Okay, so this book came out in September. What are you working on now?
I'm working on another book. I have no idea of how to talk about it yet, but it's a contemporary novel. It takes place in New York and in North Carolina, and it goes through. Probably it's going to go up to the 80s. Most of it will take place in the 60s. And beyond that, it's impossible for me to say what it is yet.
Do you have a date that it's going to be coming out yet, or no?
Well, I have a date that I'm supposed to hand it in, which is in January. Okay.
So next year.
Yeah.
Next year. Well, I just love this, and I could see humor. I mean, like there were tragic things that happened in this book, but I could see your humor coming through, like definitely through Myers. Like, he had humor about him that I loved. I mean, there
was the secret is that Meyer is the me character, and that when Meyer, who has a very sardonic wit and is constantly pissed off at people, it was me being pissed off at my characters, and I gave him the words. So it's the closest to me in that book of anybody.
Yeah, whenever he was involved, I was always cracking up at like his way of saying things.
Yeah, there's a crazy scene in there with spaghetti and sex, which I did not have that experience. I just want that to be clear.
That was funny.
It is not autobiographical.
That's right. Well, hold up the cover for everybody because I love this cover so much. Look at that. It just captures it, and I love the muted colors and everything. And which bridge is that?
This is the George Washington Bridge,
which
figures in the book.
Yeah, which is I didn't want to mistake it. I wanted to make sure I was right, but yeah, and I go over that bridge a lot. I go to New York a lot, but anyway. Well, thank you so much, Betsy. I am so happy that I got to talk to you and that I got to read this book. I can't wait till your next book, and you know where to find me because I'll be an early reader, and we'll do a video and put it out on the release date, and I can't wait. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was real fun to talk to you.
Yeah, all of Betsy's links will be listed underneath here, along with the paperback. It just came out, and so for everyone, Yeah, everyone who loves the paperbacks, that's just came out, and there'll be a link underneath here. You can go right there and buy it easily. So everything, but you have a great night. Okay, thank
Too.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.
I'm back, and you can see I'm not at home, but that's okay. I am so happy that I got here, and I was like driving so fast to be able to get here to talk to Betsy, and I'm so happy because wasn't she so sweet? This book, guys, if you like historical fiction, World War II, go get it. You will not be upset. Okay. And it's a good book, and it's long, and it's a journey, and I get happy about that. I mean, sometimes I love a quick read, and then other times a 400-page book. I just love it because you can get really into the character. So everyone, all of her links will be listed below here. You heard it on the video. If you made it this far, she's coming out with another one, and I can't wait. So everyone, thank you, and thank you, Betsy.